Hi everybody, I'm Sam. I'm the experienced researcher here at the User Story, and welcome to my sticky notes. So I'm sure we've got a large and loyal following for these things already, but for anybody that's new, sticky notes is essentially like a 15-minute slot we have every other Friday where one of us here at the User Story picks a topic, a new idea, a new form of practice that we find interesting and just tell you all about it, really. So I'm going to be talking today about what gives things meaning, which is a very broad topic to fit into 15 minutes. So I'm going to be talking about one specific element of that, kind of one process or theory, which is still a lot to fit in 15 minutes. So wish me luck. But I'm going to be talking about something called social semiotics today. And this is basically one way of understanding how meaning is created and communicated and how different contexts impact this. So what is it? Well, semiotics is the study of signs, and that's not the slightly dodgy Mel Gibson film from 20 years ago. That is signs in terms of something that conveys meaning. So that could be literally anything in a broad sense. So the sky is a sign, my t-shirt is a sign, this chair down here is a sign, Tom is a sign, sat on the sofa there. But social semiotics looks at signs in the media, so kind of design work, web design, TV, artwork, advertisements, that kind of thing, and looks at how the different social contexts impact how they're both created and understood. So semioticians are the people that study this, and they look at two main things, really. They look at how different elements of the sign interact with each other and change their meaning, so the use of different shapes and color and that type of thing, and how they relate to the broader social context which they emerge from. They also look at how things come to have an accepted collective meaning, whether that be kind of on a national level or in a workplace or in a friendship group. Because if you think about it, if something doesn't have an accepted collective meaning, it is effectively meaningless. So there's lots of different types of signs that semioticians kind of categorize when they're studying and doing their analysis, but I'll just go through a few. So the first one is kind of the mode of the sign. So that's kind of, is it visual, is it oral, is it textual? And oral is like what you can hear. Textual is like the feel of a sign, so what it tells you from its touch, not like Comic Sans kind of text. The second kind of category is signifier and signified, and this is probably the most important one. So the signifier is basically the active elements of the sign. So its color, its shape, its size, its form, all that kind of thing. And this is what we use to create meaning from the sign. The signified elements is essentially what those signifiers mean in a specific social context. So I'll give you a very brief example and a very basic example. Thumbs up is a sign. Now in Britain, that essentially is like a sign of affirmation, but in different cultural contexts, that could mean like quite a rude gesture, which I'm not going to do on the video, unfortunately. But it's the same like objective sign, no matter where it would be, I'll be doing the same thing with my hand and the same thing with my thumb. It's the context in which it's delivered and the context in which it's viewed that changes the meaning. And obviously, we all take individual meaning from things as well. So it's important that there's a collective understanding of what things mean, but we all have our own experiences and we all view things differently. So it's a minor miracle that things do have collective meaning. But this is because we kind of operate in a similar cultural context for everybody around us, and we have a kind of generally shared experience. So we essentially speak the same shared language of signs. So another key thing to think about is the relationship between the signifier and the signified. And this can either be really close or it can be quite disassociated. So on the top line here, you've got icons, and these are a close relationship. So it's quite literal. So if you've got the blue one here, that's kind of a collation of squiggles, which we would see to mean a bird, and maybe nothing more abstract than that. An index is a bit different. So that's kind of something related to the object in the sign, but not the object itself. So we took the cigarette, the index of that could be the behavior smoking. Symbols are kind of the most disassociated. So they basically only have a meaning through social convention. So if you take the cross, that's basically like a random assembly of shapes into the shape of a cross. But given the kind of specific colors that are used there and the dimensions, we would take that to mean like a sign for healthcare or the Swiss flag. It's kind of completely separated from its literal context, from its literal meaning. And depending on what context it was used in, we would know if it was a Swiss flag or if it was for healthcare. And then obviously we all have our own individual interpretation of these things. So somebody might look at that bird and think of kind of a symbol for peace. Some people might think of it as like a public nuisance that poos on your car all the time. And then just to add another layer into this, symbols can be icons, icons can be symbols, and everything can be everything essentially. So brand logos are a really good example of this. So like think of Nike. The icon of the brand of the Nike swoosh is essentially this a tick or swoosh, whatever they call it these days. The index is kind of the behavior. So people running, people buying trainers, people participating in sports. And then its symbol in a more abstract sense, the kind of consumer capitalism and the goddess Nike, which they're named after. So we kind of looked at the different forms of sign, the different types of signs, but how is meaning actually created? So I'm going to use a bit of a laboured metaphor to try and get this point across, but I want you to imagine you've got a kaleidoscope and you've got the sign at one side and you've got you, the viewer, at the other. Each stage is kind of one of the crazy refracting lens in the kaleidoscope that changes the sign as it comes through to you. So the first stage is like the context of creation. So which society did it emerge from? What do the different elements of that sign mean in that society? And what was the context of the creator? Who were they? When were they making the sign? Why were they making their sign? What purpose was it for? What were their drivers? All that kind of thing. The second is the context of delivery. So this isn't just if it's visual, oral, or textual, but also kind of the medium of delivery. So is it on a mobile phone? Is it something you can hold and touch? Is it on a billboard over there? Is it on a computer screen? And this goes back to something that the social theorist Marshall McLuhan said, which was the medium is the message, which is basically the way in which you receive a message or a sign has a big impact on how you kind of interpret it and the meaning you create from it. And then the third is the context of the recipient. So that's the context of you or me. So that's kind of what you believe, your value system, how you're brought up, the society in which you live in, but also kind of more prosaically, like where you are. Are you sat down? Are you stood up? Are you on your own? Are you surrounded by people? Are you inside or you're outside? Are you outside? And even like kind of what side of bed you go up in the morning. All these things can have an impact. So as you can probably guess, trying to determine exactly how one specific person creates meaning, given the number of variables in the recipient, is quite difficult. But we can have a very good go at understanding how collective meaning is created. So we can study the context in which they arise, so the society and who created the sign. We can look at the impact of the mode of delivery, and then we can look at kind of group behavior, what kind of values and drivers different groups have, and then we can begin to piece together collective meaning. So I'll give you a bit of an example in the following slides. So meaning evolves over time. Obviously, context and situations change over time, so meaning is highly fluid. And this process is called semiotics, and it explains how we get from an apple, meaning like a tasty, healthy snack, to cutting edge technology, which is what that picture is actually supposed to represent. It's the best one I could find easily. So how did this happen? Well, if we start with like the original apple, the signifiers are that it's red, it's round, and essentially that it's an apple. The signified are that it's kind of fresh, it's healthy, it's natural. And more abstractly, if you think the Bible, the temptation of Eve and Isaac Newton discovering gravity, it's not in the Bible, obviously. And this last reason with Isaac Newton was one of the reasons the apple was selected as the logo of the company. But how many of us look at the back of an iPhone and think of Isaac Newton, let alone a piece of fruit? And this is because kind of key signifying elements of the apple have changed, and its kind of use in different contexts has changed dramatically. So it's lost its shape, it's lost its form, it's lost its color, which is kind of the key things that we use to tell us that it's an alive, natural thing. And by its kind of use in context related to technology and machinery, which we don't normally associate with fruit, it's become further disassociated from its original meaning. So through its use in different contexts still, it's moved from icon to index to symbol. So the original apple is an icon of an apple, the fruit. It's an index when it's associated with the kind of the technological devices that Apple makes, so iPods and Macs and all that kind of stuff and all the behaviors that go along with that. And when it's associated with the kind of broader cultural impacts of the brand, it becomes a symbol. So that could be mass consumerism, it could be social status and cutting edge technology and all that kind of stuff. But obviously that's a broad brush collective view. You or I might look at the Apple logo and see something different. So one of us might look at it and see kind of the amazing design capabilities you have on a Mac. Somebody might see overpriced technology and somebody might think of Chinese sweatshops, but that's just based on our own kind of background and context, essentially. So what are the implications for social semiotics and user research? Well, it comes as no great surprise that I think there's great potential. I have just stood up and given a talk on it, obviously, but I think anything that helps us get a better understanding of how users interact with something and why users react in the way they do is important. So I think the crux of this is kind of the explicit and implicit values that users have. So I think a great weakness, or not great, a weakness of user research is that we can rely too heavily on explicit values. And we try and counteract this by kind of observing behavior and just seeing what users' implicit values are. But that's just observing the what. To understand the how and the why, we still have to rely on what they tell us, which is not necessarily always reliable. So I think semiotic analysis can help with this. So how you can conduct independent semiotic analysis of a website. So that would be kind of going through a website, identifying the key signs and deconstructing those in terms of the context of their creation and the mode of their delivery, and then conducting semiotic analysis with the user. So going through those signs and seeing how they interact with them, what they say about them, all that kind of things, how they emote around them, and then building a list of what are called archetypes. And these are basically kind of the implied elements of broader social discourse that they're alluding to when they're going through the signs. And these can be used to create really detailed kind of ethnographic level user personas in terms of helping us predict hopefully how users will behave, so we can create better test plans, better assumptions, and hopefully when we see users kind of out in the wild using a platform, understanding in a better way why they act and react in ways that they do. So I've obviously gone through that in 15 minutes, but it's a very big topic, so there's lots more to talk about. If anybody is still interested, there is a fantastic book called Mythologies by this semiotician Roland Barthes, which is about kind of how narratives and stories emerge around specific social signs. And then there's a series of articles about semiotics in UX, both research and design. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Cool.